Just ahead on American Black Journal, two poets honored by the Kresge Arts in Detroit program talk about how their works are influenced by their experiences as African American women. Plus, 31 days in the life of an elementary school principal. Don't go away. American Black Journal starts now.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, Craft Made in Maryland cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal, partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Ally and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. For the past 11 years, the Kresge Arts in Detroit initiative has recognized an eminent artist based on their professional achievements, contributions to culture, and dedication to the city. Kresge also presents a group of artists with fellowships that include $25,000 and a year of professional support. I am really pleased to have two of this year's honorees as my guests. Dr. Gloria House is the 2019 Kresge Eminent Artist. She is a poet, educator, and human rights activist. And Nandi Comer is among this year's Kresge Fellows. She is a poet and an essayist. Welcome, both of you, to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
And also, congratulations. This is like a huge, this is a huge honor for both of you. Dr. House, let's talk, you've been a guest on the show before, but let's talk about your work and this tremendous honor for your work. How did you come to decide that this is what you wanted to do with your life?
I think it was a sort of gradual decision in the early 60s as I was watching the civil rights movement evolving in the South and becoming aware of the brutalities, the atrocities, and feeling, oh, I want to be involved in making change. It's not enough to just watch those things and say, oh, that's awful. But feeling I wanted to be involved. I wanted to be among people who were working to create change.
Yeah.
And that started when I was a graduate student at Berkeley. And I found a way to make my way south, finally. A group of students from San Francisco State were organizing a book drive, raising money to go set up a freedom school in Selma. And I heard about that, and I joined them and said, yeah, I want to do this too.
Wow.
And we went down to Selma. We did set up a freedom school right in the area of Brown Chapel, which was the center of the movement work at the time. And then everything started there.
Yeah. So how did you come to poetry, or how did poetry come to you?
I had been writing poetry since I was a little girl, or trying to write poetry since I was a little girl. I was excited by it. You know, we read all of those classics, and you know, I loved the rhythms, and I loved the idea of metaphor, and I love, you know, making images or whatever. And I had the encouragement of my teachers. Yeah, try this. Go ahead, try to do that. And I tried to write little plays, but I didn't ever think of myself as a poet. It was just something that I liked to do. And over the years, I would just put my little things away, and, you know, and accumulate it. You know? So by the time I was in undergrad and grad school, I had a little collection of poems, right? But I didn't share them with anybody or talk about them,
they were
or
just
say
yours,
I want to be a poet or anything like that, right? I was just making poetry, right? So it wasn't until much later I met Dudley Randall. I was here in Detroit. I had settled here in Detroit. And I'd been working with Dudley in a series where we brought in poets from everywhere to read and do workshops. And one day, Dudley came by and said, Ineb, I know you must write poetry now. I know you must write poetry. Don't you write poetry?
Don't you do that, right?
And let me see what you've written, right? And so I brought him down this little, you know, weathered folder of poems.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's, so Dudley took that folder, and the next time I saw the folder and Dudley, he had a proof.
Is that right?
Of my first book.
As a
of
book?
poems.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
And said, here's a proof, Ineb. I want you to seek over it and see. Do you agree that it should be published? Do I agree
My
that
goodness.
it should be published?
Of course I do.
Of course. Thank you, Dudley.
Wow.
Thank you.
That is quite a story.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. Nandi, what about you? What brought you to this?
Well, I started writing poetry when I was in high school. I will say that I always wrote little stories and snippets of things all the way from elementary. But when I first attended Communication and Media Arts High School, I studied under Terry Blackhawk, who founded Inside Out Literary Arts Project.
Yes.
So I was a part of the first 3 schools that became that organization.
Wow.
But when I went to CMA, I was convinced that I was going to be a scientist.
Is that right?
Yes.
You're kind of at the wrong school for that.
But I still excelled in math and science, even though I was there. But Terry brought me off to the side after one English class and said, I'm starting a creative writing class. Would you like to join it? And after that, it was kind of like this thing that I always participated in, even though I was still going to science and math programming, and I still really enjoy a good math problem.
Yeah.
But I kind of see poetry like that.
I was going to say, there's some similarity there,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
But when she finally started to teach us about how to put together a publication, how to put together a school anthology, I really got interested in what it meant to have collaborative voices in one unit, in one thing. And so I think even when I went on to undergrad and I majored in Spanish and English, and I still wasn't a publishing poet, between high school and my mid-20s, I actually didn't have a mentor. And so I would still write these poems, but I wasn't publishing them anywhere. I didn't know much about how to publish them. And so I went off to teach, because that's what you did if you had an English and Spanish degree. But then I had a poet, Vivi Francis, who is also a Kresge Award winner. She decided to mentor several poets in the Detroit area, all of us Black poets who had not had traditional MFA kind of training.
Yeah.
And she taught us about the professionalization of being a poet. And that's how I entered into that world of what it meant to publish a poem, what it meant to put a book out there.
Sure.
If it weren't for that group, I probably would still have my notebooks tucked away somewhere.
Wow. So there's some similarity in these stories, that sort of solitary work, right? That then somebody else kind of encourages you to share. And I think that kind of captures also one of the dilemmas that all, I think, writers have, which is that the work is so solitary, but that your hope for the work is so social and public that ultimately you're doing it, or you start to do it, to try to have an effect on other people.
But you're never sure.
You are never sure, right? Yeah.
It's always a conversation between the individual work and then how the work is received by the audience, right? And sometimes it's just the individual work, and you just knowing that there's an audience there, you just have to find out who is there listening, and that takes a while as well.
And the other surprising thing is when the work is finally out, and you discover, oh, it's saying a zillion different things
that I didn't necessarily intend,
yes, I didn't
right?
necessarily do, but that's interesting. Thank you for interpreting it in that way, right?
It really is
That's
that
very
kind of
exciting.
social
Yes,
exercise, right?
And once it's out there, it's out there, right? Then it belongs to that community that you've given it to, right? It's theirs too.
Well, I could not have the two of you here and not have you share your work. So I'm going to have each of you read one of your poems. And Dr. House, you get the first honors here.
All right. I think I'll read from the book that Dudley produced
this
for
first
me.
book, yeah.
This first book is a collection of poems that came out of the civil rights movement those years that I spent in Alabama. So I'm going to read the poem entitled Selma, 1965. And it celebrates the role of the children in the civil rights movement, their tenacity, their determination, right, that they were going to be free. Selma, 1965. Amid the ghosts of civil rights marchers in Selma, in the summer so hot, the children sang in the paths of the afternoon showers, "Before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave." From the Freedom School window, we watched them come across the lawns of the housing project, down the rain-rutted dirt roads, through the puddles, waiting cool for their bare feet. Touch that dripping bush, break a leaf, and smell the pungency of green. These children were tattered angels of hope, plaits caught at an odd angle, and standing indignantly, a ripped hem hanging like a train behind them, gray knees poking through denim frames. Dancing the whole trip, they performed their historic drama against the set of their wet brick project homes.
Wow.
Selma, 65.
Wow. Wow. Do you remember writing
Yes,
that
I do.
poem?
I do. I remember sitting in our Freedom School house on St. Anne's Street writing that poem.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. That's beautiful. Nandi?
Well, the poem that I'm going to read, it comes from a collection that is deeply inspired by today's activists as well, with the Black Lives Matter movement, which has a deep relationship with the Black Poets Speak Out movement. This poem is the first poem in the collection, Dear Reader. Dear Reader, this is a private conversation. Americana circa all the centuries. Boy lynched at daylight on city canvas or southern back road or blog. Dear Trayvon, look what you started. Torso reclined on pale boulder, head tucked under right elbow, left hand still in coat pocket. Dear reader, please do not read any further. Dear Michael, I tried to ignore your face and peace sign, your mother crying next to Trayvon's mother, next to Sean's mother, next to Emmett's ghost. Dear woman in another city pleading, I am ready to mourn you. Death designs my face. Dear reader, I am not talking to you. Dear cell phone, please stay in your pockets, your purse. Do not record, do not post. If there is blood, the artist chose to omit it. Dear sheriff, dear sergeant, dear security guard, and the boy remains transfixed in his last breath. Dear principal, dear counselor, dear parent, dear man I am passing, my name is... Dear internet, please do not post my slaughter. Dear every man I know, stop, don't move, don't put your hands up, do not stop, remain. Dear unnamed black man killed again and again and again. Dear, are you surprised? Dear reader, no.
Wow. We could spend 2 days talking about the parallels between those two poems written.
Those two different eras.
Right, 50-some years apart. Wow. Well, congratulations to both of you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Thanks for having
being
us.
here on the show. This was
Thanks for having
wonderful.
us.
All right, just ahead, an eye-opening personal account of what it's like to be a school administrator. But first, here's a 1980 Detroit Black Journal conversation with poet and civil rights activist Nikki Giovanni.
Is your new book, Cotton Candy on a Rainy Day, a departure from your earlier writing styles? And if so, is it more personal?
Gee, I always have a hard time answering questions like that, because to me it's a logical outgrowth of my first book, that one is obligated to grow, to learn something. That what would be the point in 1980? I think Cotton Candy came out in '78. What would be the point between 1967, which was my first book, and 1978 of not having grown somewhat? So that, no, I don't think it's a great departure. I think that it shows some maturation. I hope so.
Is it a conscious kind of growth? You talk about growth from perhaps one book, one writing to another. Is it something that's done consciously or something that just takes place?
Well, I think a little bit of both. Only a fool would not learn from an experience. You never try to put yourself in a position of being a fool. That if something happens, there's a lesson there. Sometimes you have to think about it for a long time. But there's a lesson in everything. So that, on that level, yes, it's very conscious. On the other hand, from, say, my first book to my last, I've traveled all around the world. So there's going to be a change. Just the fact that you go to Africa, you go to Asia, you go to Europe, to the Caribbean, it's going to change you. If it doesn't, there's no point in you going. If you're going to be the same girl you were when you left Knoxville, Tennessee, then you may as well have stayed in Knoxville, Tennessee. Something, so that's sort of like an unconscious process, that you see things. You see things that make you happy, you see things that make you sad. But as long as you're alive, you're participating in the process of life.
You're an artist who expresses herself through writing. I wonder why writing? Why not some other forms of art? Why have you turned to writing?
I think I agree with all the writers that writing turned to us. We were, somebody said, well, how come you're a poet or something like that? But I don't think a writer chooses his form. I think that the form chooses the writer. There's no way on earth that I could write a play. It would never happen. I don't even think like that. But you have here in Detroit a young man, Ron Milner, whom I've known forever. Ron will never write a poem. I mean, he thinks in plays. That's all he thinks about. He sees characters, he sees scenes. And I think that's terrific. I think that's, I think it's terrific. But every writer has his own discipline.
Research shows that a high percentage of young black males are not proficient in reading. My next guest is a former school administrator and teacher who's passionate about literacy and school leadership. She works with educators, parents, and community members to improve reading among African American students. Dr. Shelley McIntosh's new book is titled A Principal's Tale: Life in 31 Days. It describes in vivid detail her experiences as an elementary school principal. Dr. McIntosh is going to lead a presentation on urban school administration at the Charles H. Wright Museum on July 13th. I am really pleased to have Dr. Shelley McIntosh here with us on the program.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations on the new book.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so tell us about life in 31 days. What does that mean?
This is exactly what it means. As a school administrator, we are labeled or given the topic or job responsibility as instructional leader, and then as manager, which is quite a lot.
Yes.
And there are different layers of accountability. So one day my administrative assistant and I said, let's look at everything that I do as a principal. And so it's being accountable to the federal government, to the state government for funding. It's being accountable to the superintendent, to the university that authorizes the school, to the director of curriculum instruction and assessment, just many layers of accountability.
Yeah.
And so I said, I want to tell my story of how the life of an urban school principal actually looks. And I was in CVS one day, and I looked over and saw this book that said, to tame your tongue in 30 days. So I said, that's an idea. Let me write about my life in 31 days.
Yeah.
And so I had a journal at home and a journal at school.
Yeah.
And so I recorded everything that I did from sunup to sundown.
And it's an incredible regimen. I mean, when you think about all of the things that you're asked to do in this role, talk about the things that we're doing right for school educators and school leaders, and the things that we're not quite getting right.
Okay, the things that we may be getting right is some support for teachers, which could be still a great deal of more support.
You do a lot more, sure.
To do a lot more for teachers. Some of the things that really are challenging now and that need special attention is first the literacy situation. So Michigan is ranked at the bottom with a few other states.
Sure.
And also the lowest to teach African American boys how to read, and the second lowest in teaching Caucasian boys how to read. So my question is, why and how did this happen? So
because we didn't used to be at the bottom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in the late 70s, there was really no gap between African American children's literacy and Caucasians. But whole language approach is what became prominent in teaching reading. So in the late 70s, it was changed.
From phonics to whole language.
From phonemic awareness, phonics, blending, to whole language. So whole language is based on the premise that a student can just see a word and remember it forever, but that's not true. So when it changed over, California was one of the states that accepted it the first, the biggest purchaser of textbooks, and it spread. Also in teacher education programs, because I was an assistant professor in the teacher education program, their philosophy was whole language. And so as a result, we produced teachers who didn't have that basic phonemic awareness, phonics, blending type of instruction to effectively teach reading. So since we have the Michigan law now, which I think is a burden on administrators, that third grade law says that if a student tests 2 grades below, they will be retained
They're going to have
in the
to
third
stay
grade.
in the 3rd grade, right?
So that is a punishment for the child when really reading instruction should have been examined, because all students can learn how to read.
Right.
And I taught children to read before they went to kindergarten, using a direct instruction approach. And if that was used within the schools today, there would be no literacy problem. So that is one, I think, major challenge facing urban school administrators.
A lot of people who don't spend time in urban schools, I think, have a lot of misconceptions about what goes on in urban schools and what some of the challenges are. But one of the things I think people who do spend a lot of time in those schools, like you have, one of the things they learn is about the kids in those schools and how desperately they want good instruction, how desperately they expect good instruction, and how disappointed they become when we don't provide that to them.
There is a need to be competent, which is an intrinsic motivator. And so when a student is in a classroom and a teacher places a textbook in front of him or an assignment that they can't read, they feel that they're not competent. So they have different ways of acting or showing their despair. And one is to act out, meaning to get loud in the classroom, or to be defiant with the teacher. Some will become introverted and not say anything at all, but they are upset and angry that they can't do this, and basically, why haven't you all taught me to do this? So I've seen different children's behaviors, and as an administrator and teachers, we would have to look at their behaviors and listen to them. When students say, I need help, that's exactly what they're saying. I need help, so please help me to be competent with this. Help me to read.
Who do you imagine you will influence with this book, or who do you hope to influence with the book?
I would like to influence everyone in the field of education, especially
from top to bottom,
from
right?
top to bottom, especially urban school administrators and those aspiring administrators, teachers, and then even for parents to see what a principal's life is. Because if we can share that story and bridge that gap, I think there would be more of a continuity and more of a collaboration and more of a community between school and parents.
Okay. Well, congratulations on the book and your life of work in this field. There's a lot of work still to do, it feels like. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. That's our program for today. You can go to AmericanBlackJournal.org for more information on our guests and to check out past episodes. And you can always connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal, partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Ally and viewers like you. Thank you.